My name is Obed Ogega. I'm a Senior Programs Officer at the African Academy of Sciences, and together with colleagues, we'll be running the ARISE grant, the African Research Initiative for Scientific Excellence. Once again, thank you for joining us, and we hope we find this session fruitful as you prepare your applications in response to our call. So a little bit about the African Academy of Sciences. We are a continental Academy of Sciences. It's an academy of all sciences that was started in 1985 and been around for 36 years now. The headquarters is in Nairobi, Kenya, but with regional offices in, the Eastern African region is headquartered in Kampala, Uganda. We have an office, the Northern African office is located in Egypt, the West African one in Burkina Faso, the Central Africa one in Cameroon, and the Southern Africa one in Johannesburg, South Africa. The African Academy of Sciences has 3 mandates, the first one being recognizing excellence, and then the second one is providing advisory and think tank functions, and the third one, where the ARISE grant falls, is implementing key STI programs in partnership with other partners. So the African context, as you probably know it, given that your research is based on the African continent, some of our immediate challenges include climate change that is affecting various aspects of our being as a continent. The second one is on food security, where we have insecurity, so to speak. Poverty is a huge challenge today, and we of course have a high disease burden and epidemiological transition issues around the continent. So where we find ourselves as researchers on the continent, we tend to have to do a lot of things together as researchers, given that our institutions are not necessarily always adequately supported to help us be able to, conduct our research in a way that we like. And unfortunately, as a researcher, you have to go through to navigate this space alone. And if you're lucky, get the support of some of our institutions, which is always not the case. So in response to the environment, the research environment that we find ourselves, the African Academy of Sciences has put together an idea which we call, Developing Research Leaders Initiative, where we work with early career researchers and work with them in the journey of transitioning to being established researchers on the continent. And our idea begins at the internship stage. So after a graduate degree, they get into maybe an internship position or tutorial assistant, and then get to a master's, a PhD, early postdoc fellowship, so 3 years or so after PhD. Then after that, you get to a full postdoctoral fellowship over to around 5 years after PhD, and you begin to become a senior researchers. So in this idea, we aim to develop early career researchers, basically working with them to really build their capacity as they walk through the journey of being established researchers on the continent. And we hope that in the process, then we end up having a thriving research ecosystem in the institutions where our postdocs are situated, that then contribute to the body of knowledge that together respond to our developmental needs as a continent. Okay, so we had a strategic, a business plan, so to speak, from 2016 to 2021. We are currently reviewing the current strategy as we usher in the new one. But basically, our strategy was based on 4 main goals. So the first one is building our research and development leadership and environments, so that our researchers have environments that support them to conduct research. Okay. And the second goal is to support, and develop innovation and science-driven entrepreneurial culture in our institutions. The third one, where a RISE grant falls, is identifying and supporting rising research leaders on the continent so that they can stay and build their careers in Africa as we develop together as a continent. And the fourth one is filling critical gaps. And this is where, if you've read the guide for applicants, you've seen platforms like the GFGP or the Good Financial Grant Practice System and others that ultimately fill the critical gap in the research landscape on the continent. So some of the programs that we put together, in response to these goals that we're talking about are here. You see things like Delta's Africa, H3A, and African Science Priorities, or ASP program, that really focus on building the R&D infrastructure on the continent. On innovation, you probably know about the Grand Challenges Africa program, and that is really keen on supporting innovative ideas on the continent as we respond to Africa's developmental priorities and challenges in partnership with others around the world. So the Rising and Emerging Research Leaders, this is where we are. We have a few programs already running. Some of you may know of programs like FLAIR, ISA RISE, CR4D, among others. And on filling critical gaps, we have things like REMPRO, or the Research Management Program, that works with the institutions to support these host institutions to provide better support to the researchers on the continent. And of course, we can't do this alone. We do this through partnerships, of course, focusing on people, places, and programs, basically finding the best researchers to conduct the best research. Yeah. Some of the major achievements that we've been able to do through our interventions together with partners over the years is that we've been able to contribute significantly to that critical mass of scientists, the next generation of scientists that will deliver the Africa we want, as envisioned in Africa's Agenda 2063. We still have a long way to go, but we're happy that we're already making steps towards that. Okay, so as a result, we are having cohorts of researchers on the continent that are already, taking their place in shaping discussions around various thematic areas, be it climate change, biomedical research, COVID, and many other things, so that ultimately we as a continent are effective even as we respond to our developmental needs. Funding opportunities, being able to mobilize resources that then help us as we together seek to achieve the objectives for which we've set out to do. So a snapshot of where our funding is and the activities or the support that is provided across the continent. You can see that over the last few years, we've invested about $112 million US, and the map to your right shows you where the funding is spread. Unfortunately, we don't have many grantees in North Africa. We don't know why, but we are working towards bridging that gap and ultimately get to work with everyone in this journey. The bulk of the support happens to be in East Africa, Southern Africa, and West Africa, and not because of anything, but because these are the regions from which we receive most applications. So ultimately, if you don't apply, then you don't get funded. You have to be in it to be part of it. Okay, and the ARISE grant is quite ambitious, as you will see shortly, because we have made it a deliberate attempt to try and issue grants to at least, issue grants in at least 40 countries, so that at least we begin to cover the gap that we are seeing. Okay, and we keep talking about the rising research leaders. What is it then that we expect of them? What would our ideal rising research leaders look like? Okay, 1 second. I'm told that I need to make my slides bigger, and my IT team is working on that in a minute. All right, sorry about that. I thought my IT skills were good, but clearly I need to do better. But thank you very much, colleague, for sorting me on that. So what are the expectations then when we set out to support our rising research leaders? What is it that we expect of them? We, of course, want to support the best researchers to conduct world-class research. I mean, the fact that we are focusing on Africa does not mean that we don't benchmark on what the rest of the world is doing. And that's why, as we see in the guide for applicants, we encourage, collaborations with researchers and institutions from the rest of the world, so that if there is need for knowledge and skill transfer, then that is done, so that ultimately we are able to achieve a bigger impact. And, at the center of grant management or grant implementation is prudence in financial management. We need to be sure that we are able to, we are able to make the best use of the resources that are given to us. And ultimately, we want to be able to see our researchers grow from where we found them to the next phase in their research careers. And we expect a lot of intra-Africa collaborations and networks, so that we are all able to, capitalize on our synergies, individual synergies, and build better for the continent. We expect research leadership, expect our researchers to be able to mentor younger researchers coming after them, so that ultimately we have thriving research ecosystems in our institutions as a continent. So we also hope to work through, initiatives such as the GLGP, strengthen institutions and help them build even stronger research support systems, so that the researchers are able to thrive and basically focus on the research while the institutions provide an enabling environment. We expect that scientists will be strong science communicators and get to engage communities and the public in general. In many cases, researchers have been accused of conducting excellent research, but only having it circulate within limited science communities. We want to see a situation where the science can actually be translated and disseminated to other communities out there that are the main target groups for the work that we do. And of course, we hope to see a future impact on science, really, and entrepreneurship and innovation on our societies, so that people get to feel the usefulness of the science that we do on the continent. And I should say that these are some of the things that we'll be looking at when we evaluate the proposals that we receive. And so it's good to take note of that. So diving into the ARISE grant then, as you may have read through the documents shared with you, you'll see that the main objective really is to broaden and strengthen Africa's science base through open and direct continental competition for funding among the very best African researchers, with the aim of contributing to the transformation of Africa into a knowledge-based and innovation-led continent. The main objectives, or the specific objectives, one are to enhance the capabilities of emerging African research leaders committed to a science and teaching career in Africa. And then number two, get to strengthen institutions in which our researchers are based, to enable them, to support them, and have them thrive in their research. The third one is to support the generation of cutting-edge research in contribution to the transformation agenda for Africa. Okay. And some highlights from the grant: we hope to award at least 40 grants to 40 African researchers across 40 countries. So 40 is the minimum. There's a possibility for a few more, depending on the applications that we receive and the funds that are available at the time. And the call for proposals is open, like I said, to all African researchers. While we are targeting to award at least 40, everyone from Africa is welcome to apply. And it's from all areas of scientific endeavor. The idea really is, that we put there the need for the proposals to align to priorities of the African Union and the European Union high-level policy dialogue on science, technology, and innovation, which is the framework against which the ARISE grant was awarded. So the information on the AU high-level policy dialogue on science, STI basically, is available on the African Union website. you're welcome to learn more about it and see how you can align your research to that. And part of the eligibility is that our definition of early career researchers, or those that are specifically targeted in these ARISE grants, are those that obtained their PhDs at least 2 years ago and not longer than 7 years ago. I know we have different definitions for early career researchers or postdocs across our universities or institutions in Africa, but for this particular grant, for the ARISE grant, we are targeting people that obtain their PhDs within this 2 to 7 years period. Okay, the grant is up to 500,000 euros in total for up to 5 years. And we at the ES are not going to be the ones doing the review and all that. There's a scientific advisory committee that has been put in place to be able to lead through the review process and ultimately help us get to select the finalists. So in terms of a highlight, it's a two-stage process. The first one is the current one, the expressions of interest, and it's a shorter version of the application process. It will be open for about 1.5 months until 30th of July. And the expressions of interest will basically check for basic eligibility and long list applicants that will then be invited to submit full applications from September, as you'll be seeing in the next slide or so. So the full applications will be open to those that go through the expressions of interest, to be open for about 2 months, after which an expert review process will begin to shortlist candidates, including interviews. And after that, the shortlisted candidates will be taken through a due diligence process, where vetting of proposed host institutions will be done before the final grant awards are made. So the timelines look like that as of now. We are the expressions of interest stage, open until 30th of July. The review of the expressions of interest will be done during August. Submission of full applications happens between September and October. A review of full applications happens from November through December. We hope to conduct interviews for shortlisted candidates during January 2022. A due diligence exercise will happen in February or March, and we hope that the fellowships will begin by April or May of next year. So a quick overview of the governance structure of the ARISE grant. So at the top is a strategic steering committee with membership from the European Commission, the African Union Commission, and the African Academy of Sciences. There is a scientific advisory committee that provides scientific guidance to the implementation team at the African Academy of Sciences, of course, in coordination with the strategic steering committee. So apart from that, there is an independent technical review committees, so to speak, that are composed of experts on thematic areas in which we receive applications. So once we receive your expressions of interest, they'll be grouped into thematic areas and then assigned to thematic expert reviews to go through the review process. Okay. And I mean, I can go on, but most of this information is provided in the documents that are on our web page, or the call documents that you already have. I think we can get straight into the question and answer session so that you're able to respond. Okay. So I'll stop sharing my screen so that I'm able to see better what's happening. Thank you. So if you have a question, we can already begin answering. I see a few hands. EIABC1, you appear first, followed by Abush Abebe. Please unmute and continue. EIBC, can't hear you. EIBC, are you there? No? Okay, maybe Abush as EIBC tries to.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Thank you very much for the presentation. I just wondered how the post-PhD requirement is strict, because I am 1 year over from the requirement, like I'm 8 years after PhD. So is it very strict that we cannot submit application, or is it kind of flexible?
So the eligibility is 2 to 7 years post PhD. Okay, and there is a reason. This is a pilot program. We want to target. We've defined our early career researchers, in the context of the African Academy of Sciences and the European Commission, together with the African Union Commission, to be people within this gap. People that obtained their PhDs at least 2 years ago and at most 7 years ago. So anyone outside this bracket is basically not eligible to apply. But we also understand that sometimes there are reasons. Maybe someone took a maternity break or something like that in their career that may have made them to take that break. So in a case like that, in a case where you are outside of this bracket, you're welcome to submit your application, but provide information so that the reviewers then will look into the information you have provided and make a decision. I hope that responds to you. Yeah, thank you. You can also, this goes to everyone. You can also post your questions under the Q&A. We'll also respond to those. Okay, so next, sorry, now the problem with the hands is you don't get to see who raised their hand first. So my apologies if I jump the queue. But can we do Dr. Prince Nana Amaniampong, followed by Nzesele?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Prince.
Yeah, thanks, Obed, for your presentation. I'm Prince from the CNRS France, but I'm Ghanaian. Is it possible for me to send in a proposal as the lead PI in collaboration with a collaborator in Ghana, using a university in Ghana as a host institution without necessarily having to move to the country during the entire project duration? Thank you.
Thanks, Prince, for your question. I think we can just take a few and then I'll respond afterwards. Sorry, apologies for mispronouncing your name, but Zenzele.
Obed, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, thanks. It's Zenzele from South Africa University of the Free State.
All right, go ahead.
I just want to check if what will be the role of the host institution, and then should, as a host, have something should we do something as we are preparing probably to admit the applicants? Is there anything that we need to do as a host institution?
Okay, thank you for that question. Boitumelo Moletsane, followed by Eddie Dion Akam.
Okay, I'm Boitumelo from VET. I want to, you may have answered because I joined in late because I had a different, an incorrect link. But firstly, will the recording be available so that we can listen to it at a later time? And then secondly, I mean, since the target group is 2 to 7 years after acquisition of a PhD, what would be the criteria, the determined criteria of a good proposal? Because I would assume at that stage, some of us, our research is not well established. So is it expected that you should have collaborators who may be senior and maybe outside of your institution, and then at the same time have people that you are pulling into your research? So what is the ultimate determining criteria for a good proposal, and how should it be demonstrated in the expression of interest?
Thank you, Boitumelo. Eddie Dion. Eddie Dion, can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. Good morning. All right. Eddie Dion Kang from the University of Lagos. I have a few questions. Now, is it possible as a PI, as a lead PI, to submit a proposal in collaboration with someone in Europe? That's one. Secondly, what happens if the lead PI has just very few publications on the proposal he's submitting? Okay, knowing that maybe he just finished his PhD 2-3 years, it's not very grounded, so he doesn't have lots of publications. Okay, then the third one is, what's the scoring criteria for this preliminary submission? What's the scoring criteria? And what do you mean, this is the fourth one now, what do you mean by science for capacity? That's the fourth scope. All right, what's science for capacity, or capacity for science, something like that? Capacity for science, yeah, what do you mean by that? And how can this young or early career researcher come in that aspect? Thank you so much.
Sorry, before you go, the last question, what science capacity?
Yeah, capacity for science, yes. What do you mean by that? How does this early career researcher come into capacity for science? It looks to me as if that's a training aspect where you train master students or postgraduate students in that aspect, in whatever you're doing or something. I don't know. So can you explain that part for me?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. George Otieno, followed by Peter Olupot.
Yes, thank you very much, Obed. I have a question on the partnership. Is there a limitation on how many partners you can have? Because the more you have them, it has a budget implication, especially on how you are going to treat them. Then secondly is about, I read through the requirements and I see it's a mandatory that you have to have at least master's students and PhDs as part of your project team. So I'm asking about the scholarships that you pay to these people. Does that constitute part of the personnel costs, or it can be elsewhere? Then the last one is on the duration. It is 5 years, and it's a long duration. And looking at the funds, the 500,000 euro, must it be 5 years or it can be less? And how does that affect the way you do the budgeting? Thank you.
Thank you. Olupot, and then I'll respond before you take another round.
Hello, thank you very much for this good presentation. You described a program level type of proposal, but then you nested in a science focused aspect. Now, to guide prospective applicants, I wanted you to distill this very clearly. Should the applicants focus on a focused scientific proposal or have a program level proposal? That's one. Then number two, I am a clinical and infectious disease epidemiologist, and most of our clinical work requires partnerships with well-established institutions in the Western world. Does this grant allow us to partner with scientists and institutions from the Western world to bring the science to Africa? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I can attempt to respond to this, the questions that have been raised so far. And this is only the first of such webinars. and the email address is still provided. So if for any reason we're not able to give you a comprehensive response, we can always follow it up. So the first one was whether it was possible for a PI based in France, for example, to apply for this grant as a PI, but collaborate with someone else based in an African institution. So this grant, the bottom line is that we target African researchers based in an African institution. So if you are applying as the PI for this grant, you basically have to be based in an African institution, based at the time of the grant implementation. That means right now you could be elsewhere, but if you come into, if you get the grant, then you need to move to an African institution, as subject to the provisions provided in our guide for applications. So the role of the host institution. So we do not give, for example, grant funds to individuals. We have to give them to a host institution. Again, there is an eligibility criteria defined in the guide for applicants that defines what we consider as an eligible host institution. So this host institution then provides administration of the funds, and as the PI, you are subject to the terms, really, the policies and terms of the host institution where you are based. So this is the role, to provide that governance, but also ensuring it's governance and administrative support to the grantees. So someone asked if the recordings will be available. Yes, we'll be posting a link to the recording on the web page for the RISE grant. So you're able to see that together with the slides. Okay. There was a question on the criteria for a good proposal, given the possibility that someone that obtained their PhD at most 7 years ago may not have had a lot of, publications coming out or research leadership experience through that period. So two things. One, everyone will be measured against these criteria. So everyone is supposed to have gone through, given that everyone, for example, no one beyond the 7-year threshold is reviewed together with those that are within that threshold. That puts everyone at the same page. But also, I would advise for you not to look at just the 2 to 7 year post-PhD experience as the only eligibility criteria. There are a few others. So please look at the eligibility criteria in totality, as opposed to looking at this as the single eligibility criterion. The bottom line is that the PIs for the RISE grant should be able to provide considerable scientific leadership to their research teams. So that leadership could be obtained through, productivity in publications and things like that. But also, if someone has had a postdoc fellowship, or they've been working after their PhD in a field that gives them what would be equated to a research leadership experience. So all these things together are what constitute the qualification of a PI. So please look at the eligibility criteria in totality, as opposed to singling out the 2 to 7 year experience. What happens if there was a question on if someone has too few publications? Again, I think I've already answered that. Publications is not the only consideration to be eligible. There are these others that have been listed. The scoring criteria, we have alluded to it in our guide for applicants. We put there what the reviewers will be looking at. Okay, so please read that document. So what we mean science capacity building. So two things. You are applying to conduct research in principle. Even as you provide scientific leadership to the grantees, you are conducting research. So by doing this, for being supported to do this as a researcher, we are basically building your capacity as a researcher. After 5 years, you surely would have improved from where you are to where you'll be in the next 5 years. So that is the science capacity building that we're talking about. And I should also mention that during the 5 years of the implementation process, there'll be capacity building activities, training on science communication or grantmanship, or leadership, and a few other activities that are already planned as part of our research, our support to the ARISE grantees, so that ultimately at the end of the 5 years, the researchers' capacity would have been built, so to speak. Partnerships, if there is a limit to the number of partnerships, I mean, we leave that to you. Remember, the expectation is that you're supposed to demonstrate research leadership, even as you submit your proposals. So we've given you a duration, which is 5 years. We've told you the support that we can provide you during this time. We've given you the background against which the ARISE grant is based. So you, as the PI, person making this proposal, you know your research better. You're the one that is going to determine what partnerships you need to be able to successfully implement your project. We put there a minimum, for example, number of research, MSc and PhD students that should be enrolled. This is basically for you to be able to transfer the skills that you have to the younger researchers coming after you. So instead of going to hire a research assistant, you can, the research assistant can as well be a PhD student, so that they also get to learn from you as you implement the grant. Okay. In terms of where the PhD and MSc students will be paid from, it's part of the 500,000 euros that has been provided. So if these guys are employed as research assistants, then under personnel costs, you should put there the cost for research assistants, which are the PhD and MSc students. The cost of scholarship would be other direct costs, something like that. So the best approach to this is please work with your grant accountants. One of the challenges that we see with our grantees or applicants is that at the proposal stage, you decide to develop your own budget on your own. You are a scientist. You may know a few things on accounting, but it helps quite a bit if you're able to work with a grant accountant so that they're able to, help you through budgeting for the grant. So consider doing that. The duration, whether it must be 5 years, again, that's up to you. If when you propose your research, the research that you're proposing can only be done in 4 years, the reviewers will pick that. So be honest with yourself, quantify the amount of work that needs to be done. And as you develop a work plan, you should be able to establish the best time. So for now, we are saying a maximum of 5 years. How long that is supposed to be, we leave it to you as the person proposing. Should applications focus on scientific program rather than a project? This question was not very clear to me, so kindly, if you can put it on the Q&A function, I'll be able to retake it. So I think those are the questions that I picked. We can do another round. Yeah. And just a second. I see 19 hands raised. I'll be random. Ayana from Benin, followed by, I don't know if Ayana's hand is still up, but Atta Francis, then Gregory Jua. Atta Francis.
Okay, good morning. My name is Dr. Atta Francis Alfred from the University of Ilorin, Nigeria. I want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry I came a little late because I had issues with the link too. My question is basically on collaboration, network of collaborators. For me, some of the equipment I would like to use for my proposed research are not readily available here in Nigeria. For instance, the Malditov machine, the MS machine are not readily available here. In short, they are not available at all, even within Nigeria, within West Africa. So I would like to awaken my existing collaboration I have with a European institution. I don't know if this is permitted and how many can we have within the proposal Can we have up to 2, for instance, if I want to do part of my collaborative work with a UK institution, and I also want to do that with that of Vienna, let's say in a European institution different from UK, is it permitted? How many? What is the limit? And within Africa and within Nigeria, how many network of collaboration are we advised? Is it advisable to use for grantees if successful?
Thank you. Gregory, did you have a question? Or was it what you put on the chat?
No, it's just to say hi. And sorry for the technical issues.
No, no problem. Thanks, Gregory. Gregory is one of the conveners of this meeting, so happy to have you on board. I see Tabitha Amolo, followed by Felix Dube and Stanley Kuja, in that order, please.
This is Tabitha from Egerton University, Kenya. I want to appreciate the presentation. We had issues with the link at the beginning. My question is more or less, my first question is more or less like the previous attendee has put forward, the issue of partnership. Are we allowed to partner with the institutions outside of Africa, for example, from the US, and then within Africa, for example, or from the institution, are we allowed researchers, like I'm going to be the PI, then perhaps is it allowed that I partner with researchers? Of course, will make contribution project.
Thank you, Tabitha.
Yes.
Thank you. Felix Dube, I think.
Hi, Obed. Thank you so much for a very informative presentation. My name is Felix from the University of Cape Town. I wanted to find out, in terms of eligibility, are current flare holders eligible to apply? And then the second thing was just some form of thoughts around South-to-South collaborations, that is collaborations within Africa. For many of the equipment needs and resources that I heard many of my fellow attendees indicating as bottlenecks for their research partnerships, I think within the university in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, in Durban, and other places such as the Gambia, Kenya, they have quite a broad suite of resources, and those are potential partners that people can look into. Thank you.
Sorry, Dube, I missed the first question. Could you say that again?
The first question was around eligibility, and that was to find out whether current FLAIR fellows are eligible to apply for arrays.
Thank you. Thank you. Stanley Kuja.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yes, thanks, Obed, for the presentation and opportunity. Stanley Kuja from Rhodes University, South Africa. My question is also under the eligibility criteria. I see one of the requirements is that you must have been employed as a postdoc, researcher, or assistant professor. Does this, I mean, what if you joined the research institution directly after your PhD as a lecturer?
Thank you. So I think I can do one or two more. Emma Harigua, followed by Omamuyui Ijomone. My apologies if I don't pronounce your names right. So Emna Harigwa followed by Omamuyui.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Thank you for the presentation. Well, my question is also about eligibility of the PI. Does a postdoctoral fellow with non-permanent position is eligible as a PI? And if it's the case, is it possible to have its own salary on the budget of the project? So this is the first part about eligibility. And the second question is about the team. So I heard that it is mostly PhD students and master students that need to be included within the team that will work on the project during 5 years. But I suppose there would be other members and staff that are permanent faculty members at my institution or professors from my group that need to be involved in order to help in supervising this horde of PhD and master students. So my question is there is a possibility of hiring an engineer, research engineer or a postdoctoral fellow besides on the same budget? Thank you.
Thank you. Omamuyui.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Albert. I have 2 questions. I'll go straight. The first is, maybe
Sorry, I can hardly hear you. Please speak
can
up.
you hear me now?
Yeah, let's try.
You can hear me very well.
Yeah, that's better.
So can a proposal include advanced?
Sorry, I lost you again.
Hello, can you hear me?
The sound keeps coming up and going. So
can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay, thank you. So I was going to ask, if a proposal includes maybe an advanced sequencing service that it's cost effective to be done by an external company, likely maybe in Europe or in the US, can such things be included, because like a paid service? So does the grant allow for that? And where would that expenses be allocated to? I assume under materials. Then would such a company be considered a collaborator? Though it's unlikely, but I just wanted to clarify that. Then number 2, will the successful application be compulsorily spread across all 40 countries? So let's say, for example, a country like Nigeria or Ghana has 3 to 5 excellent applications. They will have to be ranked against each other to consider maybe a lesser scored applications from other countries. That's number 2. And then number 3, does the grant allow for outreach activities? Let's say science outreach activities or some form of advocacy.
All right. All right. So I think let me try to respond to those. Then we will go through the Q&A questions. After which we will still have enough time. I see that we have quite a number of questions in the Q&A, and then we'll see how much more time we have left. So let me begin with the issue of partnerships and collaborations. So we still have a few questions on how many should be eligible or how many are allowed. We actually left that at the discretion of the applicant. So you know your research, you know what you need to be able to implement the research that you are proposing. So long as it's reasonable and justifiable, so please put it in your proposal, say this is what you need, and then the application will be reviewed, based on the information that you provide. And even at the award stage, once the reviewers have been able to, assess your application and they think that maybe you missed out on a potentially good partnership or collaboration that you could use, those recommendations are always made so that ultimately you are able to achieve, you are able to be supported to implement your project. And where a partnership is seen not to be necessary, sometimes our reviewer panels can get back to you and tell you that we don't think this is necessary in this case, or you can do it in a different way. So for now, please don't focus your attention at the limitation, but rather, what do you need to implement your project? If you need 2 partnerships, and a partnership can take any form. It can be that you're working with a collaborator from, you know, a university somewhere outside of Africa or within Africa that has specific expertise that you need to implement your project. You're welcome to put them in your proposal. Okay. And then I think related to that, someone was asking if partnerships or collaborations are allowed with, you know, from outside of Africa. We, again, have not limited, not said where the partnerships have to come from. So what we've done in our proposal, especially if you look at, I mean, there are many parts in the guide for applicants where this is listed, but I'm particularly looking at section 3.5 under fundable items, and we're talking about visiting periods in partner research institutions of up to 6 months spread throughout the grant period with pre-authorization from the RIS team. So the bottom line is that the PI must, you know, conduct the RIS grant within Africa. So we have said that you can have partnerships or collaborative visits or research visits, whatever you want to call them. But we are limiting this to 6 months in total, spread throughout the 5 years. So for example, you can't spend 3 years in the US, in a lab in the US, conducting research. You're supposed to be in Africa, providing research leadership to the research team that you put in place, you know, the postgraduate students, but also taking charge and ensuring that you're able to conduct your research. So yes, we allow research visits where necessary. Again, some projects may not even need research visits abroad, but if you do, put it in your proposal, and then it will be considered. Only that before you visit, I think at the beginning of the beginning of the project implementation, our monitoring and evaluation teams will be working with the finalists to develop M&E plans, you know, so that you agree on the deliverables. Now you're going to deliver this. So if research visits are planned, then they are able to be identified at the beginning. The AS team, the team that is implementing the grant, is able to take note of that and follow through. Okay. Someone asked about if the current, you know, FLAIR is one of the grants implemented by the AS. So I think this is a current FLAIR fellow asking if they are eligible to apply. So there is a time commitment requirement on this grant. This applies to people holding other, you know, positions or grants from elsewhere. You need to demonstrate that you can commit at least 80% of your time on the RIS grant. So if you have other duties or other tasks to do during that time, you'll be required to show a commitment of at least 80% of your time on the RIS grant. So I think that answers your question. If you're going to commit 80% of your time on the RIS grant, and I'm sure FLAIR has a time commitment of about 70%, so then you need to look at the possibility of you being able to dedicate 80% of your time on the RIS grant. And those are the duties that you have. Okay. Whether the PI can draw a salary from this project, yes, I think it's in most universities or institutions, it's referred to as a stipend. I mean, it depends on the policies of your host institution, but work with them so that you get to see what provisions do they have, what HR provisions do they have for grant holders, and work with them. Because at the beginning of the project, we'll be asking you for the HR policies and practices for your host institution. That then is what informs your onboarding on this grant. So if the research assistants can only be MSc and PhD students, so the answer is no. I mean, you know your project, we don't know, but we are only saying that as you put together your team, please ensure that you have at least 4 MSc students and at least 2 PhD students. I think that's the number. I just need to double check. Yeah. So that limit of PhD and master's students that we put is the bare minimum. If there is a need to hire an engineer or a lab technician or something like that, you're welcome to do so within your proposal. Okay. Whether you can outsource some paid services, yes, you can do that. If you need, for example, to sequence some samples in Liverpool, for example, and that is basically because you don't have a sequencing facility in your university, you can put that cost as a cost, an outsourced service. It could be subcontracting, or I don't know how you call it. Again, it would depend on the policies of your host institution, but that provision is there, so long as you're able to do it within your budget. Outreach activities, of course, the emphasis of this grant is that you don't just do research that is going to settle at the shelves of our research institutions. We need you to work with our, your own community and public engagement teams, but also if you need support, we have a community and public engagement office at the AS that is then able to support you as you plan for your CPE, community and public engagement activities. Ultimately, the target groups in your research have to be adequately involved. And once you have findings from your project, it's only prudent that you go back to these user communities and share your findings with them. Okay. The criteria for selecting 40 applicants from 40 countries. So I must say from the onset that even as we try to achieve regional, gender, and all those other considerations, this will not be done at the expense of scientific merit. So we must have excellent proposals from the 40 countries that you're looking at. So the evaluation will be done in such a way that all applications will first be evaluated against the scientific merit. Okay. If we go through the list and only see that the excellent or the proposals that meet the minimum excellence threshold are only coming from 20 countries, then those are the countries that will be considered. It's only that we'll be happy, really looking forward to having proposals from as many countries as possible so that we don't leave any country behind. And yeah, so I think that answers the eligibility criteria. There will be, like I said, if you look at the guide for applicants, we have alluded to what we'll be looking at. So the novelty above everything else, the scientific merit in the work that is being proposed, and the feasibility of items in there, among other eligibility criteria items that have been listed. But we don't have to make awards to 40 countries if we don't have proposals that meet the scientific merit criteria that has been set out. And in terms of partnerships, I also wanted to mention that please do not limit yourself. If we want to encourage, while that is not a mandatory requirement, we'll be happy to see proposals that reflect intra-Africa collaboration, so that a researcher from South Africa can collaborate with another from Benin or Nigeria or wherever, so long as the synergies in the 2 or 3 institutions complement each other for a better impact, a bigger impact. So please don't limit yourself. We are happy to see collaborations happening. So the postdoctoral fellowship experience, again, that's indicative. You could, again, like I said, different universities have different ways of doing things. There are those that immediately after your PhD, you can only be employed as a postdoc fellow. There are those where you join as a lecturer or something else. So what we are looking for in that criterion is to be able to see a possibility for you, or research leadership, basically. So if you're going to lead a team, you need some experience, some research leadership experience that then you can use to adequately lead the team that is working with you. So if your university happened to have taken you in as a lecturer, but you're working as a lecturer and research at the same time, you have supervised X number of students, that constitutes your research leadership experience or your leadership experience altogether. So please put in your application, provide that information so that we get to see that. I know, for example, universities in South Africa, for you to be a postdoc fellow or to be employed as a postdoctoral research fellow is maybe after 5 years or so, and that's different from some other universities where you can immediately become a postdoc fellow. So don't let the definition of postdoc fellowship limit you. Just put a justification statement there that provides us with the information. Okay, I see we have less than about 20 minutes left. Let me rush through, get to see if we can respond to some of the questions in the Q&A. My colleagues have been trying to respond to a few. So the first one, hi there. There was some confusion regarding the start time in South Africa. Is the meeting start now? Or starting now? I think that is the time was supposed to be 12 noon EAT. I hope the person writing this was able to join us. Thanks for this program. I would wish a clarification on the audit budget in terms of range and whether the auditor is internal or external. So there is information provided on the audit. If you look at the guide for applicants, this is provided. But please feel free to send us an email, then we'll link you to our grant accountant so that they're able to provide you with more information on the audit. Okay, Dr. Elfaz, is it fine to write alone and indicate the partners, or what extent do the partners appear in the proposal on the PhD? So remember, the group that you put together, the research team that you put together is part of your proposal. We need to say that, for example, you're proposing to do this amount of work. If you don't show us the people that are going to work with you during the implementation process, a reviewer may tell you that you don't have the capacity to implement what you proposed. So it's good to mention right from the beginning that you're actually planning to work with this particular team to be able to deliver the scope of work that you're proposing. Okay, please, in addition to the letter of support from the principal investigators institution, is it necessary at this stage of the ARISE process to provide letters of support from all other co-investigators? It's not mandatory, but it's welcome. What we need at this stage is at least a letter of support from your proposed host institution. Could qualifications for PI be expanded to 10 years? Unfortunately for now, and for this particular grant, 2 to 7 years inclusive, post-PhD is the requirement. Okay, how many applicants will be invited to submit full proposals? We don't know. It will depend on the review process. Once we review the the expressions of interest, we'll then get to know the numbers invited. I'm from Management Sciences. Am I eligible to apply for this grant? Again, the grant is open to all fields of scholarship. So anyone is welcome to apply, so long as they're able to respond to the items that are listed or the provisions of the call. Okay. In the guide for applicants document, there's a statement which says that applicants for the ARISE PP grant must not fall under any of the exclusion criteria referred to in point 2.6.10 of the PRAG. So point 2.6.10 is not anywhere in the document. It is there actually as a footnote. So we provided a link to the PRAG. If you quickly, PRAG is on page 6. So there's a link there. Footnote 3. You'll be able to see that. So this grant is funded by the European Commission. That means it's also subject to the terms and conditions of the European Commission or the European Union. So Prague is one such, and then it's important that you ensure that you are not part of those. You don't meet the exclusion criteria referred to in Prague. Okay. Please clarify what you mean by financial contribution will be 100% reimbursement. Yeah, absolutely. You may say in your proposal that you are going to spend 500,000 euros, but during the implementation, you only get to spend 300,000 euros. So you only get to, so the grant, at the end of your grant, then you would have only, your grant amount would have only reduced to 300,000 because that is what you're only able to spend. So that's what we mean by 100% reimbursement. You propose 500,000, but only able to spend 400. So your grant amount at the end of the project reduces from the 5,000 that you proposed, 500,000 to the 400 that you're able to spend. Can we collaborate with the US? Again, that is at your discretion, provided that it adds value to your proposal. Pour l'appel à manifestation d'entrée, quels sont les documents à fournir? So this is someone asking about what documents to provide for the expressions of interest. If you refer to the webpage or the call for applications, we have listed there what we need. And there's also a questionnaire. When you begin filling the form on our Ishango system, you're able to see the documents that you're supposed to provide. Can individuals without PhD apply, like someone with a fellowship? No, unfortunately, this particular one requires that you hold a PhD. I know we've had questions with medical doctors, and if that is part of it. Unfortunately, for this particular one, you must hold a PhD, at least to at least, you know, the 2 to 7 year threshold. Okay. Okay. Can I use facilities in Europe? Again, I've answered that. Can one apply as a group? Again, I've answered that. But basically, the person submitting is one, but you could be submitting, you know, on behalf of your research team, which is the rest of your team. It could be collaborators, you know, everyone else that you want to engage in your research project. Okay. Many questions about the 2 to 7 years. Yeah, we know this is a big issue, but for purposes of uniformity and sticking to the objectives of this particular call, the 2 to 7 years inclusive post-PhD requirement is fixed. Okay. Many thanks for organizing this. In the guide for applicants, it is written that scientific excellence is the primary criterion of evaluation, but that the application should be aligned with the objectives of the program, including the priorities of the AU-EU high-level policy dialogue. Is it crucial for applicants to know well the policy framework in order to be successful in the program? So like you rightly put it, the policy or the AU-EU high-level policy dialogue on STI really provides a framework, but the direction that your research takes is really up to you. So this is not the only consideration. So long as you're broadly looking at the main objectives of the AU-EU high-level, you know, policy dialogue on STI, your proposal can take any form. It's about your work contributing to transforming lives in the aspects defined by the AU-EU high-level policy on STI. Okay. In the guidance note, it says funding can be provided to master and PhD students. Can you also alternatively hire postdocs? So, like I said earlier, the MSc and PhD students are minimum. If the scope of work that you're proposing to do requires that you have a postdoc, you're welcome to do so. Again, this could be a supervisor or a collaborator from elsewhere. That is really up to you, dependent on the work that you're proposing to do. I noticed that it's open to all areas of research. My research interests are in political science. How eligible am I? Political science is one of those all areas of research, so please don't limit yourself. But I should also say that, you know, some of the proposals or the grants that we've given, you know, seem to be, how do I put it? Transdisciplinary research or multidisciplinary research, you know, by virtue of being able to combine synergies from different disciplines, makes your proposal to have a potentially bigger impact than when you're doing it from one particular disciplinary area. So transdisciplinary or multidisciplinary research is encouraged, but it's not the only criteria for eligibility. Okay. Can the postdoc applicant use the grant to support themselves? Yes, of course, where required, I must say. Okay. In the grant guidelines, it is 3 international compulsory meetings. So these are the minimum, okay? We have, one of these, for example, is the inception meeting that happens just before you begin your grant during Q2 of 2022. So you should already plan for that one. Then we'll be having a scientific meeting, and a scientific meeting during, I think the mid of the 5-year implementation period, and an end of grant workshop that brings together all the grantees. So we put these 3 international meetings as the minimum that you should plan for. If you require to do a few more in your, you know, depending on the scope of the work that you're doing, you're welcome to do so. Okay. Time is running out. Our proposal could include whole transcriptome sequencing to be performed at as a paid service. I think I've answered this already. I'm planning to apply for the ARISE proposal as a PI, but I have other postdocs who are interested in working with me. Is it possible to have 2 or 3 postdocs as co-applicants? I've answered this already. Co-applicants are collaborators are welcome, but the person submitting the application can only be one, the person identified in this grant as the PI. Can we partner with industry where some of the members will not have a PhD? So the PhD requirement is on the PI, the person submitting the proposal. Who else you want to bring on board, so long as you have at least the 4 master's students and the 2 PhDs required. The rest really depend on the scope of work that you want to do and the technical support that you need in the implementation of your work. Okay. If a potential PI is not an African national, but married to an African, and thus domiciled in an African country, will he or she be eligible under this scheme? So unfortunately, like we said, the terminology in the grant is that this is open to African nationals. So you must be an African national. Multiple country applications have said collaborations are welcome. Again, so put it in your proposal and tell us what you want to do. Are the costs for research assistance included only research costs or also salary, school fees, blah, blah, blah. So this is at your discretion. And of course, with reference to the policies, the HR policies of your host institution. This is the part where I encourage you to work with the accountants of your, the research institutions that you want to base your ARISE grant. They'll be able to advise you better on how to allocate some of these costs. Okay. Does funding cover infrastructure, lab equipment? Please refer to the guide for applicants. There is a particular link provided to cost guidelines so that you're able to see what's eligible and what's not in terms of costs. What happens if postdoc is not currently affiliated to an institution, but can have a collaboration with others who are currently working in research institutions? So like I said, as of now, at the application stage, you don't have to be affiliated to the host institution that you want to base, where you want to do your research from. Provided that at the time when you begin to implement the ARISE grant, you will be based at the host institution. So you can be elsewhere right now, but by showing a letter of support from this institution, the host institution, then you work towards ensuring that you are able to be based at that host institution as required by the grant. Also, will topics that are not among the listed priority areas? Yes, it's open to all fields of science. That is the bottom line. The PI should spend at least 8% of their time. What does that mean? Considering university professors, because you also teach in the university. So this 80% time commitment is really to enable you to have protected time to conduct research. Yeah, you basically cannot outsource the PI-ship, if I may use that term, of this particular grant. I don't know what works in some of your universities, but what I've seen other applicants do is when you get a grant like this, you ask for a sabbatical or a leave of absence or something, and ask the universities to be able to allow you to do this research. What I've seen other PIs do is, if you know that you're going to get a stipend from this particular grant and you allocate it, you ask the university to allow you to spend your time on the grant and get your stipend from here, but then the university hires a part-time lecturer or something to take on the other workloads that you would ordinarily do if you are not implementing the ARISE grant. So work with the host institutions and see what possibilities are there. But the bottom line is, as the PI, you are required to spend at least 80% of your time on this grant. Okay. Can you talk about the allowed budget? So I would refer you, because of time, I'll refer you to the guide for applicants. We provided a link that leads you to the cost guidelines, the guidance on budgeting, basically. You can find more information there. And then if you don't, please feel free to write to us. Okay, I wish to ask if AS sponsor research studies on ecotoxicology. Again, all fields of research. Okay. If the guide for applicants peers is expected to be responsible for the capacity building of the research team through mentorship and supervision with the support from the host institutions, can you please elaborate more on this criterion? I've talked about it. It's about you as the PI, and this is why you need some degree, considerable research leadership experience so that you are able to provide leadership to the research team, including the MSc and PhD students. Okay. For lack of relevant equipment for my proposed research, I need to revive my existing collaboration with the lab in Europe. Please, is this permitted under this grant? Yes, I've already talked about that, as provided for in the terms, the provisions of the call. As you may know, African university-based PhDs are achieved with few publications. Is there any chance for a candidate having few publications in this field? So like I said, publications are not the only standard of defining research leadership experience. So be innovative if there are other things that you've done. For example, you've supervised X number of MSc and PhD students, you've been involved in specific tasks that you think give you significant research leadership experience, put that as the information, and then our reviewers will consider that. But publications are not the only, they are a good indicator of research leadership, but they're not the only one. Okay, time is really not on our side today, but like I said, our email address is still open, and we'll have another webinar in the next week or so. We will please keep check the webpage for more information. I still have a minute or two. My colleagues, please feel free to prompt me if there's anything burning that I've missed on this as we go through the last few minutes. To employ a PhD student, there would have to be your student on your project. Does the grant cover a PhD registration costs? Or, like I said, we have not defined what kind of support you are giving to the PhD student or the MSc student. So please work with your grant accountants and budget accordingly. Ultimately, we need to see that you have at least 4 MSc and at least 2 PhD students as put in the guide for applications. Okay, someone is asking about what can be funded. There is a link to the cost guidelines and the budget provisions as well. Given the timelines, would a PI with only 1 year post-PhD at the moment be eligible? So long as you obtained your PhD at least 2 years ago and not longer than 7 years ago, then that eligibility criteria applies. But like I said, that is not the only consideration for eligibility. Please look at the eligibility criteria listed in totality, not in isolation. Are current MRC African Research Leader Fellowships eligible to apply? Yes, like I said, this is not limited to universities. It's universities and research institutions. Please refer to section 3.6 of the guide for applicants. And if you're not sure, feel free to write to us. We'll be able to respond. And ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of today's session. Very excited to see the interest, the number of questions coming through. I regret that we've not answered all your questions, but please feel free to email us and bring them up during our next session that is happening one week or two from now. We'll put up the link on the application process. But we're also available to respond to your questions that you may have on email. Please feel free to write to us. Until next time, it's a goodbye from us and a big thank you to colleagues for helping me put this together. Gregory and the rest of my colleagues at the AS. Thank you very much and good luck as you prepare your applications. We hope to see quite a number of you submitting your proposals for this very interesting grant. Thank you and best wishes.